Breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. Breaking news. Yesterday was the Illinois Republican Party, the party that represents everybody, including the grassroots, had their state central committee meeting yesterday down in Edwardsville, Illinois, about 5 hours south from Chicago. And fireworks. And joining me here to discuss the State Central Committee meeting is a gentleman we all know, and he spoke. And so he's going to give us some insight from the inside. He is attorney and former AG candidate Tom DeVore. Tom, welcome back to Mark My Words. How are you?
Good evening, Mark. How are you?
Doing well. Tom, it's not like we keep hammering the Illinois GOP because we've got nothing better to do. It's because they keep tripping over each other. But Tom, you were at yesterday's State Central Committee meeting. Can you set the stage for starters? The Illinois Republican Party put out a notice, an email that said only each State Central Committee member, and there are 17, each State Central Committee member can only invite one person for public comment, and that person has to be registered through this, has to register with the state party by Friday. The meeting was on Saturday, by Friday night, and so that was a rule to limit the people that could speak. But when you arrived, set the stage, what happened?
So there's only, at the most, 10 people in the crowd that weren't a part of the committee or the chairman's administration, Mark. So less than 10. And there were a few people that and you had to not only let them know by 6 o'clock the night before, but it can only be at the request of one of the State Central Committee persons. And so they were limiting it really to 17 invited people to speak. Well, given that there weren't that many people there, I and one or two other people who had been pre-registered the night before spoke. And then Don Tracy, out of the blue, said, well, anybody else in the crowd that would like to make public comment, go ahead if you would like, because there's not that many people here. And that was how it first started, Mark.
Well, and very interesting, because in December's State Central Committee meeting in Bolingbrook, over 200-plus grassroots activists, conservatives had showed up to voice their opinions, and they were limited to 90 seconds, but this time they wanted to avoid that. Very interesting, Tom. But Tom, you got up and spoke briefly, and you as well were limited to just 2 minutes of speaking. But can you give us an idea of what your speech focused on before Chairman Tracy and the rest of the State Central Committee?
Yeah, it was, again, a couple of minutes. You can't do much, Mark. But what I focused on with them is, just the complete dysfunction that's going on within the State Central Committee. And I've sat by since last August when they picked Don to continue as chairman. I sat back and I watched go through the general election and the state party level. It was really dysfunctional and inept. Nothing was happening to help candidates. But I pointed out to them that, look, I gave a couple of examples of how we don't have any leadership. And it's, just the reality of it, Mark. And one example I gave was that the state party sent out a flyer in support of the Republican candidate in the general election. I think it was in DuPage County. You probably know, I think his name
Greg Hart. Greg Hart.
And they sent out a flyer, Mark, and the flyer was clearly representing Mr. Hart as a pro-choice Republican. And, I don't have any disrespect for the political beliefs of Mr. Hart. That's his business. But the party platform that was adopted by the Illinois GOP is strictly pro-life. And so before they start sending out mailers, which is, again, sent on behalf of the candidate, but the GOP is the one with their name on it, endorsing a candidate whose political beliefs are contrary to the state party platform. That's a huge issue because it's being done with no oversight whatsoever. The party's not talking about their platform, and they want to debate platform changes. They can do that, and people can voice their concerns, but that was completely wrong. Another thing they did is send out a mailer that was 100% fabricated and false. And it was a gentleman who was running for office against an establishment Republican in the primary, and they copy and pasted J.B. Pritzker's face over one of this man's friends, and it's complete fraud. And so I pointed out that this is representative of the leadership, Mark, and the leadership is allowing this to happen, and it's completely apparent that they're biased towards, whoever the House caucus or the Senate caucus is wanting to push through. And so when Don Tracy says that they remain neutral during these elections, it's complete facade. They didn't remain neutral in any fashion. And I said it's gotten so bad that Don Tracy has to resign. Wasn't being critical of Don. It's just there's never going to be any way to move the ball down the field for Republicans in Illinois unless the administration and the state party and the grassroots organizations are on the same page, and they couldn't be farther apart, and that lies with Don.
Tom, in case you're tuning in, we're on the phone with attorney Tom DeVore, former AG candidate here in Illinois, who was at Saturday's State Central Committee meeting in Edwardsville. Tom, as you were holding Chairman Tracy and his administration accountable with these mailers, did he have any response whatsoever? Did he remain silent?
He did. He had one response to me where he admitted that the flyer that sent out for Mr. Hart that was pro-life stance of this gentleman, he admitted that was a mistake and shouldn't have been done. But again, admitting that you've made a mistake, I can appreciate and respect that. But I'm not really pounding on the fact that one mistake was made. What I'm doing is evidencing and laying out a whole dysfunction of the way that things work. And this was just one example of it, Mark. And so Don's response, again, acknowledging one mistake is not the same thing, because then when I pointed out to them in my closing remarks, this endorsement committee that Don unilaterally created, that is completely contrary to the grassroots organizations in the Republican Party. It'd be the Democrats would be the same way, but again, we're Republicans. And how most of and great many of the committee members on the State Central Party, they don't even support this committee that Don created. And that committee is dead on arrival in the organization. But the fact that Don created it, to me, was further evidence that he's not best suited to be the chairman of the party, because he's just going to keep driving wedges between the administration and the state party representatives and the grassroots. And this is just another example of that. And again, I didn't attack anybody. I just made it. I'm saying what everybody's thinking, Mark, is that it's time for Don to do something. He if he wants to continue to be a part of our party, that's great. We want him to. We're not going to turn anybody away necessarily, but he doesn't need to be leading the organization. Is pretty much what I said.
Tom, we're hearing a lot from some of Don Tracy's allies on the State Central Committee within the Illinois GOP leadership structure that Don is incredibly pro-grassroots, but did you see any support whatsoever when you became the Republican nominee for Attorney General? Did you have any support? Did they talk about your campaign at all on social media? What did that look like from the Illinois GOP, who says that they've been pro-grassroots all along?
No, that's just lip service again. And I don't have a problem, Mark. You know me pretty well. Having disagreements with people in our own party about things, that's fine. We can have those conversations. But when, Don and the people that work for him just flat out lie, I'm sitting there looking at, just own your decisions and don't lie about it. Because from the time I won the primary on June 28th until the election on November 8th, the Illinois State GOP, you will not find one announcement, one mention of my candidacy. And I'm not saying that would have moved the needle at all, Mark, let's be clear. But they didn't put one. And not only did they put one for me, they didn't put one for Mr. Bailey either. So I've been around Don a lot. I'm not picking, I'm not criticizing, but anybody in this state that would say that Don Tracy is pro-grassroots or believes in the grassroots being a material part of the organization, they don't know Don, because that's just not him. And again, I disagree with him. I'm not going to start pounding on, Don, bad guy, bad. It's just saying I disagree with him because the grassroots to me are you have to be a part of that. I live in it. That's me. And we all need to work together. But Don he thinks I think you've written it maybe, Mark, that he thinks of them as third-class citizens. I've not seen anything out of Don, any decisions out of Don that would disagree with that statement or be contradictory to that statement. So what he says out of his mouth is inconsistent with what his actions are. The endorsement committee was a perfect example of him wanting to put his thumb on the scale during primaries to get people through that he thinks him and the other elites should get through. And I'll never support that, and I'll do everything I can to stop it.
Tom, can I hold you up for one more segment? Do you mind?
Sure.
All right. You're listening to Mark My Words. We'll be right back.